Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me I have Dan.
Hey Alex.
Thankfully, slightly more positive feelings, emotions around this episode than the last one. We have a win to talk about against Ipswich on the weekend, 2-0, and then a less impressive result against Wigan this morning with a 2-1 defeat. But we'll start with the Ipswich game, and it was a bit of a game of firsts for the season, really. Incredibly, Marshall's first clean sheet for us, Jared Bowen's first goal of the season for us, and our first win at home for the season. So all round a very positive display, positive outcome. And it's been a while since we've had such a comfortable result. So what was your take on the game, Dan?
Um, it was I guess like 2-0 is a comfortable result, but I don't know if I mean we played pretty well, but I still necessarily wouldn't describe it as a comfortable like game to watch. It was still pretty nervy, and I think Ipswich themselves they subbed off about the 70th minute or something. They subbed off one of their wingers who had probably been just really starting to get over the top of Burke. He was just really starting to get in behind a few times, and then they subbed him off and sort of halted a bit of their momentum that they were making. They were actually starting to look fairly dangerous, but I think overall we played pretty well. A bit unfortunate for Dan Batty with his knee injury, and Kingsley I think just got a rib knock or something. So, but that was a bit that sort of I thought that could have potentially derailed us. I mean, Stewart came on, and I guess he did enough, but I didn't think he did much. I think the only thing I saw him do was get a needless yellow card for dragging someone down. But um, he obviously did enough that he got the start like tonight, or this morning, I mean. But Marshall was good again, obviously. It actually surprised me when you mentioned the other day that it was his first clean sheet for the club. I think there was me and Mitch, and we're all shocked.
Well, yeah,
Just
because when you think about it, obviously he's been with the club for this is his third season.
yeah,
Obviously hasn't started a heap of games because in the first season in the Premier League we had Jakubovic for most, well, second half of it, I guess. And then McGregor in goal last season. So he's not had a whole lot of starts, but that being said, you'd expect him to have got a clean sheet somewhere along the way, even just a nil-nil draw.
yeah. It'd be interesting to see how many games he actually has played for the club so far to see how long it's been without a clean sheet for us. But I mean, it's good. I think like we've he's copped a lot of flack from us previously in his time here, but he seems to have really stepped up this season to be the senior goalkeeper. Um, he's playing very well. I can't really fault him for a lot of the season. Um, it's been it's been good. And what else we had? Yeah, Bowen finally got a goal, and a good little goal it was. And he honestly could have had a hat trick at least. He had another two chances. I think they were just about one-on-ones, which their keeper did really well to save. Um, Irvine came on, and
That was a very good
he's
goal, to be honest. I think
it was
I've
he
seen a few people sort of, I wouldn't say dismiss it, but a few people sort of write it off as a sort of, well, when you're in that position, you've got to score those. But really, the way that he holds off the defender with that strength and gets in behind, there aren't a whole lot of players in our side who'd be able to do that. And there's not many players that seem willing to do that, quite frankly. And it's good to see when he comes on, he has that sort of energy and enthusiasm about him to sort of put his body on the line and really, go all out to score a goal.
Yeah, he's been very impressive. I mean, I was going to say when he comes off the bench, but he's been impressive just about throughout. When he started and when he's come off the bench, it doesn't really matter what position or what the scenario is. He seems to be playing. He's just playing really well at the moment as well. But yeah, I agree. I think it was a good goal. It was he made the right run. He was in the right position. Maybe yes, if he's in that position, he should always score those. But you're right. He did. There was a lot of work to get him to that spot and to be in a position to receive the ball. And um, I I was it was an exciting goal to watch, and I was just happy to see it go in. I think it was late enough in the piece that you could sort of it was the nail in the coffin for the game. So it was important in that respect as well.
32 games Marshall has started for us. I'm not sure if the stat about his first clean sheet is just in the league. In the league, he's just started 26 games, which is still a considerable number of games to take to get to your first clean sheet. So
Yeah, well,
it's a pretty remarkable stat in itself.
that's essentially half a season.
Yeah,
So that's going half a season without keeping a clean sheet. I'm glad that he's got one out of the way now, and hopefully we can get a few more.
definitely. What's your sense on Bowen breaking his duck? Was it sort of obviously, speaking with hindsight after this morning, it was in some ways the floodgates opening, or at least taking that pressure off his back. But do you sort of expect him to go on now and really sort of start finishing a lot more of those chances that he, as you said, could have even had a few more goals against Ipswich?
I yeah, I don't know what happened. 'Cause, like, I mean, he's been playing okay, but probably not at the heady heights of last season. But I think obviously whether he's just been pulled aside in the international break and said, "Look, just take a weight off his shoulders. Just go out and do what you got to do. Don't worry about like you don't have to do everything or whatever it was." But because he came out against Ipswich and he was outstanding, and I mean I haven't, but he scored again, and I mean this is potentially like as you said, floodgates opening. It could well be that now he's couple in a two in two. He could start to. He's building that confidence and building that momentum. So I mean, I can only hope that that's the case.
Well, we started to talk about the game there, so we may as well move on to that Ipswich result, which was less flattering than the Ipswich result. Sorry, the Wigan result was less flattering than the Ipswich result. Um, it was really a good chance. Wigan have been in good form to start the season, but as a promoted club back in the league, it was a good chance for us to go and get another result and sort of start to build a bit of momentum. So it was disappointing from that point of view not to get something out of the game, and unfortunately unable to watch the first half of that game with some issues with Tigers TV. But by all reports, we were really under the pump in that first half when they scored their two goals early on. Of course, the second being from Josh Windass, sort of inevitable when those sorts of plays. The only surprise was that Nick Powell didn't get on the score sheet as well. But Morsey, Windass getting their goals. Bowen, as we've just touched on, getting a late consolation for us in that first half, offering some hope for the second half, which didn't really amount to much in the end. Um, Really, I mean, there was a lot of pressure on us to get that result against Ipswich because I think if we'd lost it, we would have been bottom. What's your sense of our league position at the moment? I mean, if we'd beaten Wigan, we would have been pretty comfortably mid-table. Do you sort of feel like we're going to pull away from the relegation zone, or do you think that that loss against Wigan's more sort of indicative that yes, we might win the occasional game, but on average, we're going to sort of be pulled towards that relegation fight?
I think it's hard to read too much into the Wigan game because for the previous other seven league games, we've played with the 4-2-3-1, and then we come out against Wigan and we've played a 4-4-2 and tried two up top, and for whatever reason it hasn't worked. I don't know whether it's a lack of chemistry between Martin and Dicko or who knows what it is, but it just didn't seem to work. And I mean, it did surprise me a little bit. I mean, they always why change a winning formula. That's
Yeah.
I mean, first point. I mean, I understand we got to rotate players, and maybe the players that we had to rotate in, we couldn't have. He couldn't work into the other formation, but it just seemed strange to me to just suddenly to change, and
And
I
five
think
players as well seems quite extreme. I mean, I take your point about rotating, and we'll talk about the Reading game soon, where perhaps there's more focus on that one. But we've seen time and again in the past that danger of sort of taking one eye off the game that's next on the schedule, resting players, rotating players, with an eye to a game that's potentially more important, more significance. Um, you lose the game midweek as we've done, and then who knows, we might go to Reading or entertain Reading on the weekend and drop points in that one as well. There's no guarantee that having rested these players will now go out and get a result against Reading. So, sort of playing with fire to an extent.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was strange, particularly when, like, I mean, they just had 2 weeks off,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
um, like they've had. It's not
And
like
for, and for, for, for the first time in ages, we didn't really have many players going on international duty.
it was what 3 or
I think,
something
yeah, I think it
maybe.
was only three. And
There's
one of those was Irvine, who didn't play a game
yeah,
against Australia.
he didn't do anything. He just went and was with the squad and the new
Yeah.
manager. So but yeah, no, it was strange. I was honestly surprised that Campbell didn't still start. Like I thought, I've he's literally I he's done nothing wrong really in the last like in pretty much all year. I mean he maybe hasn't scored as many as he would have liked, but he's been doing a lot of work
Yeah, well, I mean,
for the team and
he might be the only one that I could suspect might have been managed, just because I know
mm,
last season his fitness was an issue that he couldn't start 2 games in a week. I thought potentially his fitness would be a lot better this season, as he himself has said, but potentially managed. But then when you've got, and I guess Batty was potentially injured, so that might be why Stewart came in. And then you've got the issue of then, well, you also want to work Irvine back into the team, but surely then you'd sort of bring Irvine in for Batty potentially. And just, starting Stewart confused me a little bit. And yeah, as you say, changing formation to go top top. I mean, we've all been sort of, to an extent, calling for it, um, but it just seemed a random time to try and change that. Try that.
yeah, I thought it was I did think it was a strange timing but yeah. Back to what the original point was do I think the Wigan game is going to be indicative of our season? Potentially a little bit. We're sort of at that point where winning that game against Ipswich was vital. It was so incredibly important that we had to do that. But we're getting to that point in the season now. We're getting close to that 10 games where you get a really good indication of where the table starts to unfold and the top teams go a bit further away from the bottom and the bottom teams get a bit further away from everyone else. And it's starting to get to a point where it doesn't take much. It only takes, we've lost this game against Wigan. If we happen, as you mentioned, say, if we lose against Reading on the weekend and we've dropped 6 points in a week, then all of a sudden those teams that are just ahead of us, which all of a sudden on the weekend were a point, 2 points ahead, all of a sudden they might be 5, 6 points ahead of us, and it starts to become a gap that's very difficult to catch up and overcome over the course of the season.
Well, that's probably a good point to start to talk about that Reading game, which is up next. Be an interesting one. It always seems to be interesting with Reading these last few seasons. They seem to be making a habit of collecting ex-City players. It's almost, if you combined a Reading and Villa 11, you could probably almost make an entire team out of ex-City players,
Oh,
those
don't
two
forget
sides.
Derby.
Oh, Derby as well, yeah. So it seems like there's a lot of our ex-employees floating around the championship at the moment. Myler seems to be out of the Reading team at the moment. I saw that he was sitting on Twitter. I think it was on the Saturday night while they were playing. Not sure whether he's injured or something like that. It would be nice if he was in the team against us on the Saturday night just to see him um, again at the KCOM. But it's a pretty big game. I mean, we've already sort of said Reading sitting in 22nd. They've only won one of their last 5 games, so there is definitely a chance there to sort of capitalise on some poor form. They play Norwich tomorrow morning, so we'll see how they come out of that one. But it's another. I mean, we've got a couple of these games. There's a couple. You could almost call them 6 pointers. It's probably a bit early to call them that. But if we want to push away from that relegation zone, these are the sorts of games we really need to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, you want to be aiming. The aim has to be 3 points from every game. Obviously, sometimes that is maybe a little too ambitious for what we have, but I think this is definitely. I mean, I thought the Wigan game was winnable, but I mean, I would have been happy to take a draw. I'm probably disappointed with the loss, but I think I'd be upset to not take 3 points away from Reading.
And it was my mistake. We're actually away at Reading, not at the KCOM. But it's interesting. We seem to generally have played better away this season. So, the Wigan result aside, generally, hopefully that bodes well. Um, so we've sort of seen 5 rotations during the week for the side, presumably in some cases to rest players for this game against Reading. In which case, would you see many changes made to the side that played against Wigan midweek? I mean, I guess potentially Batty back into midfield for Stewart would be the obvious one. Otherwise, would there be any other moves you'd make?
Phew, oh yeah, I mean I agree. If Batty's fit, then he'll come straight back in. Like no doubts about that. But
Which is pretty
um,
incredible. Like, I mean, we sort of take it as a matter of course that he's basically a best 11 player now, but he's come out of absolutely nowhere and he's had a tremendous start to the season.
yeah, I think I made a comment a few weeks ago saying that like it was good that to have a player that's come through our academy and done all that to be such an important player in our squad, but at the same time he's about 5 years younger than any other midfield, like central midfielder we
Yeah.
have, and he's probably outperforming just about all of them. Um, just doing the simple things and doing them really well. But in terms of the lineup for Reading, I mean, it, it depends on whether Adkins wants to run 4-4-2 again and run two up top, um, or whether he's going to have the players fit to or revert back to the 4-2-3-1. I'd probably be surprised if Campbell didn't come back in, which would probably be at the expense of Dicko, because Martin is one of Adkins' recent signings, and Campbell's been performing well. So if we assume that the Wigan game was just a rest and just a management and just make sure that he's 100%, then I think he would come back in. I don't really think there'd be. I don't want too many changes because maybe that's why we didn't go well against Wigan. Maybe it's just maybe it was just an off night for whatever reason. But I I think it's I don't like making too many changes between consecutive games unless like you're absolutely forced to with
Yeah.
a horror run of injuries or something.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have a score prediction for this one?
I'm gonna go with 2-1. We'll have it'll be Bowen. I think we'll get another one to make it through 3 games in a row, and the other one goal will come from a surprising place, and I think it's going to come from one of the defenders.
Potentially Elphick, perhaps? As we already
Yeah,
know, he's got a bit of goal scoring form this season, as seems to be our recruitment policy in recent times.
yeah. I don't, that it seems I don't know. That is a funny point you make because I like when under Slutsky that was the thing that like Irvine scored against us and Dicko scored against us,
Yeah,
and we just went and signed them all, and then you sort of thought, I mean, I guess it's a strategy to take all the players that scored against you from their respective teams and bring them to your club, but I mean, it's not the normal strategy. And then Elphick scored against us, and now we've signed him on loan. We're under a different manager, so maybe it is the strategy. Maybe it's a go-to play.
yeah, so it'll be interesting. So yeah, I agree with you. I could see perhaps a 2-1 win, 1-0 win potentially. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be a scrappy game. Hopefully this is a good sign for Bowen that he's found his scoring boots and we can start to play a bit more attacking football and scoring a few goals would be good. I think to be honest, last season, a lot of what kept us up, or at least, kept our momentum going, was the amount of goals that we'd scored, which really meant that our goal difference was a lot better than the sides around us. So if we can start to build on that again this season, that would be at least something to hang our hats on. Um, but yeah, so we've got that game coming up this weekend. And yeah, I think that's about it. Normally we have 2 games to preview because we've been playing a few midweek games recently, but this will be our only game. I think it must be League Cup middle of next week, which is why we aren't playing because we have been knocked out of that competition. Just before we head off, I did want to sort of bring up a topic that's sort of starting to float around on social media, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit in talking about the strategy in the Wigan game. But what's your assessment of Adkins as manager so far this season? He obviously came in probably about halfway through last season and mixed reception to begin with. Everyone was a bit underwhelmed by his appointment. And he was still able to get pretty attacking football out of us, kind of following on from Slutsky. And and we'd have those sorts of 4-3 win over Norwich, or you know big wins like that, scoring a lot of goals, and it was still seen as quite an entertaining brand of football. Starting this season hasn't been as attacking. Obviously, only the 2 wins for the season so far. Not scoring a lot of goals, which then means it's quite difficult if we're not keeping clean sheets. Um, but then, of course, Adkins has had a pretty difficult task to deal with a pretty bad sort of um, transfer transfer strategy, I guess you'd call it. So it's not all on his shoulders for how we've been playing. But what's your take on his management so far?
Um, yeah, it's I think in terms of just the football side and what he's done on the pitch, I'm probably a little underwhelmed, probably a little bit disappointed. I mean, I know that we maybe don't have the strongest squad in the league, but I expected that we would have been playing a little better than we have been for the majority. And I'm hoping like that game against Ipswich and that becomes that we're turning the corner and everything's starting to fall into place. But I think like it's not. I couldn't give him like if I was gonna grade him, he's definitely not in the A grading, in my opinion. Um, he's probably struggling to. He's probably like a B minus. Like he's okay, but not outstanding. He's only just maybe above average. And that's only factoring in, as you mentioned, like all of the ridiculous behind the scenes, behind closed doors club management scenarios with the various um, issues that are going on there. Yeah, so on a like a on that sort of a scaling system, I'd give him a B minus.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting one. I suspect that the owners aren't going to be too encouraged to make any moves um, in that department. And I guess, Ehab's comments recently about us being a self-sustaining, efficiently run club, whether it's in the Championship or League One, doesn't very much bode well for his attitude about potential relegation. So it'll be an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see if the fans stay on side. If we can start to pick up a few more results, of course, that's going to help things. Um, but yes, if we lose a few more games like we did against Wigan, it'll be very interesting indeed. But hopefully we get a better result than that against Reading on the weekend. So thank you for coming on, Dan.
No worries.
And thank you everyone for listening in. Hopefully we can get that win against Reading and bounce back pretty quickly. But until next time, come on, City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're out.